You've been lied to about World War II heroes. They tell you the Victoria Cross goes to the bravest of the brave, that Britain honours its warriors without prejudice, that the military awards system is fair and just. Rubbish. Let me tell you about a man who destroyed over 100 enemy aircraft single-handedly, who rescued wounded soldiers while under machine gun fire, who had his Victoria Cross recommendation signed by a field marshal, endorsed by a king, and supported by Winston Churchill himself, and then had it mysteriously crossed out by an anonymous hand. His name was Paddy Mayne, and this is the story they don't want you to know. But before I tell you why Britain denied him the VC, you need to understand something that will blow your mind. Something the British government kept quiet for 80 years. Because here's the thing, only one member of the British SAS has ever been rewarded the Victoria Cross. Just one in 84 years. Stay with me, because what happened to Paddy Mayne is even more shocking than you think. December 14th, 1941, the North African desert. A man walks towards an enemy airfield. His name is Robert Blair Mayne, but everyone calls him Paddy. He's 6'3", built like a rugby player, because he is a rugby player. Irish international, British Lions, but tonight he's not here for sport. He's here to destroy the Luftwaffe. And here's where the myth starts, because they'll tell you Paddy Mayne was a psychotic killer, that he was recruited from a prison cell, that he machine gunned 30 pilots in cold blood in a mess hall. All rubbish. But we'll get to that later, because first you need to see what he actually did that night. 24 aircraft destroyed, the entire airfield neutralised, the German air presence in North Africa crippled. The SAS was supposed to be disbanded after their first mission failed catastrophically, but David Stirling, the founder, knew this raid changed everything. He said everyone now was quite happy that the unit wasn't going to fold, because with a haul like that, they'd be stupid to say no more. Paddy Mayne saved the SAS. But here's what they don't tell you. That was just the beginning. By the end of the North African campaign, Paddy Mayne had destroyed over 100 enemy aircraft, more than most RAF fighter pilots shot down in the air. He did it on the ground, in the dark, surrounded by thousands of enemy soldiers. The man was unstoppable, and Britain rewarded him with a Distinguished Service Order. Then he earned another one, then another one, then another one. 4 DSOs. Do you know how rare that is? Only 7 British officers in history have received 4 DSOs. Paddy Mayne was one of them. But wait, it gets better. Or worse, depending on how you look at it. Because France gave him their highest honour, the Legion of Honour, their equivalent of the Victoria Cross. And the Croix de Guerre. He was the first foreigner ever to receive both simultaneously from post-war France. So let me get this straight. France thinks he deserves their highest award. Britain gives him 4 DSOs. His commanders worship him. His men would follow him into hell. But the Victoria Cross? Denied. And the reason why? Well, that's where this story gets really dark. Because we're not just talking about one man being overlooked. We're talking about institutional prejudice, class warfare, a clerical error that changed history, and a cover-up that lasted 80 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before I tell you about the scandal, you need to see the moment that should have earned him the VC. The moment that 5 generals said was the most heroic thing they'd ever witnessed. April 9th, 1945. Oldenberg, Germany. The war is almost over. Hitler's regime is crumbling, but the fighting is more brutal than ever because desperate men fight hardest. The SAS is advancing. B and C squadrons, elite soldiers, the best of the best, and they drive straight into an ambush. German paratroopers, Hitler Youth, Wallstrom militia, all of them entrenched in farmhouses and dense woodland, all of them with clear firing lines to the road. The first burst of machine gun fire kills the squadron commander, dead instantly. The rest of the men are pinned down in a ditch, wounded, bleeding, dying. And the Germans aren't stopping. They're pouring fire into the kill zone. It's a massacre. Back at headquarters, Lieutenant Colonel Paddy Mayne hears the radio chatter. He knows exactly what's happening. He knows his men are dying. And he knows he's been given strict orders not to lead missions in the field anymore. He's too valuable, too senior. If he dies, the SAS loses its commander. So what does he do? He grabs a jeep, mounts a Bren machine gun to it, and asks for a gunner volunteer. Lieutenant John Scott steps forward. Paddy drives the jeep straight up the road, the same road where the squadron leader was just killed earlier. Machine gun fire everywhere. He's given John Scott cool, precise fire orders, like he's on a training exercise, not in a kill zone. They suppress the enemy, drive back to cover, and then Paddy Mayne does something insane. He turns the jeep around and drives back into the kill zone. John Scott, the gunner, later said Colonel Mayne fully realised the risk, yet once more turned the jeep around and drove up the road. This time, Paddy jumps out, under fire, walks to the ditch where his wounded men are trapped, lifts them up one by one, places them in the jeep. The official citation says the enemy had by now been mainly killed or wounded. The few who remained were in full retreat. Translation: Paddy Mayne broke the entire German defensive line by himself with one jeep and one gunner. He saved his men's lives. He turned the tide of the battle. He enabled the Allied advance to continue. 5 senior officers signed the VC recommendation: the Brigadier, 3 generals, and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery himself. The citation used words like unsurpassed heroism and utter disregard for danger. King George VI personally questioned why the VC Cross had so strangely eluded him. Winston Churchill was reportedly shocked when told of the denial. So what happened? Why was the VC recommendation crossed out and replaced with a 3rd bar to his DSO? Here's where it gets controversial, because there are 5 theories, and every single one of them is damning. But first, tell me why you think he was denied. The first myth is a clerical error. The VC criteria requires a signal act of valour. That means outstanding, exceptional, beyond normal heroism. But someone in the War Office misread it. They thought it said single act of valour. One word, one letter different, and because Lieutenant John Scott was providing covering fire, they concluded Paddy Mayne didn't act alone, so they denied the Victoria Cross. And here's what makes it even more suspicious. The person who denied the VC and awarded the 3rd bar to the DSO didn't sign their name. Just a pen stroke that erased history. So was it really just a clerical error, or was someone looking for an excuse to deny the VC? Let me ask you something. What do you think British generals in 1945 thought of the SAS? Did they see them as heroes, the future of special operations? No, they called them raiders of the thug variety, pirates, berserkers. David Stirling, the founder of the SAS, said it explicitly. There was resentment from traditional military hierarchies. The unit's controversial reputation and potential resentment from senior commanders who viewed them as thugs influenced decisions. And by 1945, the VC criteria had tightened significantly. They preferred posthumous awards, safer politically. Dead men don't cause controversy, but Paddy Mayne survived, which meant if they gave him the VC, they'd be legitimising the SAS, sending a message that special forces deserved the highest honours. The establishment wasn't ready for that, but it gets worse. Because Theory 3 involves something even uglier, something Britain doesn't like to talk about: class and nationality. Paddy Mayne was Irish, from Newtownards, County Down, Northern Ireland, and in 1945 Britain, that mattered. While Northern Ireland was part of the UK, the Irish were still viewed with suspicion by the English establishment. Paddy had a soft Irish brogue. He was a provincial lawyer, not from the officer class elite. He didn't go to Sandhurst. He wasn't part of the old boys club, and he made enemies because he couldn't hide his contempt for incompetence. One SAS veteran said his face didn't fit, but his actions did. Paddy Mayne didn't play games. He led from the front. He expected people to work hard and behave like gentlemen, because he was one. But to the establishment, he was an outsider, a rough Irish soldier who was too direct, too physical, too unconventional. France saw a hero, Britain saw a problem. And here's the thing, we'll never know for sure how much his Irish background affected the decision, because nobody wrote it down. They didn't have to. Prejudice works silently. Which brings us up to theory number 4, the myths that destroyed his reputation. Here's what people believe about Paddy Mayne. He was recruited from a prison cell after assaulting his commanding officer. He was a psychotic killer who murdered 30 pilots in cold blood. He was an uncontrollable drunk who terrorised his own men. All of these were rubbish. But here's the terrifying thing. These myths might have cost him the Victoria Cross. The prison story, invented. The 30 pilots murdered story. The real story is he shot 2 pilots who moved threateningly, then left to finish planting explosives. But the myths about Mayne stuck, and they spread. The BBC series SAS Rogue Heroes portrayed him as a drunk, violent Irishman. But here's what his actual comrades said. The regimental padre, he cared deeply and passionately for the welfare of his men. Paddy was sensitive and shy. John Randall said he expected people to behave as gentlemen because he was one. He led from the front and people admired him. And Paddy himself, people think I'm a big, mad Irishman, but I'm not. I calculate the risks for and against, and then I have a go. This wasn't a psychopath. This was a calculated, brave, compassionate leader. But the myths were more entertaining than the truth. Can't give Britain's highest honour to a violent drunk, can we? Even if he isn't one. In 2025, Jim Shannon, MP for Strangford, Paddy Mayne's hometown, has called for a review into Paddy Mayne's VC campaign, and he's backed by 3 former Defence Secretaries. But there's opposition. The Spectator argues this opens Pandora's box. Every denied VC recipient has advocates. Where does it stop? They say historical decisions should stand, that modern sensibilities shouldn't override 1945 judgments. But the counter-argument is simple. This isn't about modern sensibilities. This is about correcting a documented clerical error. And if Britain can't correct a proven mistake after 80 years, what does that say about justice? Paddy Mayne deserves the Victoria Cross, but will the government agree? Here's what we know for certain. Paddy Mayne destroyed over 100 enemy aircraft, more than most fighter races. He rescued wounded men under machine gun fire in April 1945. 5 senior officers recommended him for the VC, including Field Marshal Montgomery. King George VI questioned why he didn't receive it. Someone crossed out Victoria Cross and wrote 3rd bar to DSO without signing their name. A letter from 1945 reveals signal may have been misread as single. France gave him their highest honour. Britain gave him 4 DSOs, but not the VC. Now you tell me, was this a clerical error or institutional prejudice? Was this about medal criteria or class nationality? Was this an unfortunate oversight or deliberate erasure? The 2025 review will supposedly give us answers, but I'll tell you what I think. I think Britain owes Paddy Mayne an apology. I think the SAS deserves recognition, and I think 80 years of injustice is long enough. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Spectator is right. Maybe we shouldn't rewrite history. Should Paddy Mayne receive the Victoria Cross? Let us know in the comments. Paddy Mayne died in 1955 at the age of 40 in a car accident. Some say suicide. A mile-long funeral procession followed him to the grave. He was a rugby international, a lawyer, a soldier, a leader, a legend, and he might finally get the recognition he earned 80 years ago, or Britain might deny him one more time. Either way, his story deserves to be told, because heroes shouldn't be forgotten, even when their faces don't fit. Hi soldiers, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments, and check out our merch and membership programs. And don't forget to check back in again soon. That's an order.